Hello, welcome to Module 4 of Manage Risk BSBRSK501, Risk Management of Education. Again, this is my favorite slide to remind everybody to go through the learning materials. You can download a number of learning materials from the portal, including my additional learning materials that have been uploaded on the portal. This presentation includes some key concepts, so you need to find the details on your study guide and other learning materials that have been uploaded. Right, just a bit of reminder, guys, that I would suggest that you again download the study guide, assessment brief, assessment template to help you addressing the assessment tasks and the subject outline. And to go through each module, so roughly one module in approximately 2 weeks. If you can do that faster, that's great. And I received some messages or emails from students that they are basically showing that they are basically ahead of the timetable. That is fantastic, guys. Keep it up. And we have these assessment tasks that we need to address. And if you need my help, you can send me an email or messages. That's my email address. Or for non-academic support, please contact the Student Services Center. Okay, so that's the objectives of the subject. Establish the risk context, identify risk, analyze risk, select and implement treatment. And for this module, our learning goals, there are 2 things that we try to achieve with this module. Understand risk evaluation and understand risk prioritization. Okay, the purpose of risk evaluation is actually to assist in making decisions based on the outcomes of risk analysis. Remember, in the previous module, we discussed about the risk analysis. Now, if you refer to the risk management process framework that we discussed in risk in module 1, we actually follow that that framework. Okay, and now we are going to discuss about the risk evaluation. And in terms of risk evaluation, it involves comparing the risk, comparing the level of risk found during the analysis. So after when we analyze risk events, we analyze the likelihood, we analyze the consequences or impact. We will get the level of risk or risk level. Okay? Based on that risk level, we actually determine we actually evaluate it. That leads us to prioritization of the risk. Okay, now evaluating risk for treatment. Well, some people suggest qualitative. We have what we call as a 3x3 matrix. The 3x3 matrix in here actually refers to the rating that we use. Just, you know, there are 3 rating scales that we are using, which are basically low, moderate, and high. Okay, for both likelihood and impact. As a result, we will get 3x3 matrix, okay, because both of them use low, moderate, and high. Okay, now this one here is an example. Let's say we have identified risk, data loss. Okay, and the likelihood of losing data is quite low, the impact is quite high, and in terms of score rating would be moderate. Okay, so that's an example of using 3x3 matrix. Some people suggest it is kind of qualitative because we are not using numbers in here. Okay, but actually These 3x3 matrix, you can also convert them into numbers, right? For instance, low to be rated as 1, moderate to be rated as 2, and high to be rated as 3. That will give you the quantitative approach. And a lot of business people like quantitative approach because it's more tangible in quote unquote for them, more feasible in quote unquote for the top management, rather than just wording, which is probably harder for us to understand the level of risk. Okay. Right. Now, from quantitative approach, some people also look at, we can also rate our risk, likelihood, and impact based on this. We can map them. Let's say we have 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, 0.9, for instance, and we can map them here using this kind of matrix in terms of likelihood and impact. Right. Based on that, we can, based on our analysis on the likelihood and also consequences, we can prioritize risk, right, for our treatments, okay? Because the outcome of risk evaluation is leading us to the risk level or level of risk, okay? Now, the level of risk helps us which one that we need to attack first, okay? So that leads us to the risk prioritization, okay? All right, questions. Why do we have to prioritize the risk, okay? Well, just some reasons here. You may be able to list down even more reasons why we need to prioritize risks. Like any other management functions or business approach, we can prioritize our our workload, for instance, or that helps us, okay? Because in the context of risk management, this helps the organization allocating their resources, okay? If we prioritize risks based on the level that we discussed before, that helps us allocating our resources, which one that we need to focus more, okay? And remember, when we address risks, we may need to spend resources. We may need to allocate some budget. We may need to allocate time. So when time is basically. So we need to allocate that to handle risks facing the business. This also helps the organizations detecting risks that require attention from more senior in the management level. Okay, some organizations have got their procedure. Actually, lots of organizations have got that procedure. At certain level of risk, well, this is quite high, so we need to elevate that to the next level. So we keep the senior management team in the loop. We flag that to the senior management team to get involved in that risk. And also, organizations have limited resources, right? Large organizations, medium organizations, small organizations, they all shout that, well, hey, we have limited resources here, right? Therefore, allocations, priority of allocation is quite relevant for them. It's quite relevant for all organizations. Okay, now prioritize risk for treatment. Organizations may decide to accept or tolerate certain risks because the risk is low and the cost of treatment is too high. Well, how much is the risk? If the risk event is really happening, how much are we losing? Let's say, for argument's sake, well, a few $100, and with the size of our organization, let's say we are quite large, and well, cost of treatment is too high just to treat that kind of risk. Okay, we accept it. Okay, and there is no effective treatment available. There is nothing available to help us. Let's say if it is related to Mother Nature, based on the forecast, well, we'll have monsoon, for instance. Well, we'll accept it, or we are going to tolerate it. We can't manage it, right? There is no effective treatment, right? Therefore, they want to delay the activity, and the opportunities outweigh the risks. Okay, the opportunities outweigh the risks. Okay, remember, organizations pursue opportunities to grow the business. Okay, and In doing so, we may need to look at all opportunities out there, and in our attempt of seizing the opportunities, we need to look at the risks. And when we juggle the risks and opportunities, of course, we expect that the opportunities would outweigh the risk. So we'll accept it. Yep, we move on. Yeah, we are aware of the risks. Therefore, but the opportunities or the reward outweighs the risks. Now, how do we know the risk is low enough to be acceptable or quite high to be rejected? So we need to consider of moving on, for instance. Okay. Well, some experts suggest what they call as the ALARP principle. Okay. It stands for as low as reasonably practicable, right? And it has three categories of risks. Okay. The first one is if risks are intolerable because the quantified risks cannot be justified except in extraordinary circumstances. So that is the first category, intolerable. The second category is basically risks that fall under broadly acceptable okay, provided risk management systems are in place. So we can accept it, yes, because yeah, broadly speaking, can accept it, given that our system is in place and do not require expenditure or on further risk reduction. If we want to reduce the risk, probably if we still spend some money, it is not that significant. Acceptable or tolerable and further risk reduction is either impracticable or too costly. Okay, so either impracticable, it is not practicable, or too costly. For instance, if we need to redesign the building for to have a safety place, a safer place, then it may be not practicable for us. So we need to think another way to keep the safety in our workplace, whilst it is becoming not too costly for us as well. So we got to manage that as well in terms of acceptable or tolerable. Such risks are considered as low as reasonably practicable, okay, at the time of assessment, but they must be kept under review as risks can change. Okay? Right, so this is a bit of diagram of ALARP. So here there are three categories that we just discussed: intolerable region, tolerable, or broadly acceptable region. Okay? Here is the tolerable area where we can accept risks, and above that, we can't justify it under any circumstances. If risks fall, when we analyze that, risk falls in here. Not tolerable, it falls under intolerable region. That's it. We need to move on. We may want to reject it or delay the activities, for instance, because it's beyond our tolerance. Okay, and then if the risk is tolerable only if risk reduction is impracticable, or if its cost is grossly disproportionate to the improvement gained. Okay? Or it also falls. It also because the residual risk tolerable only if further risk reduction is impracticable. Okay? Now, the broadly acceptable region, we need to keep monitoring it as discussed before. Okay, so I guess this diagram tells us better for those who like visual presentation. Okay. In terms of ALARP, we have some questions here, right? Well, look, depending on the organization, organizations may develop even further, even longer list of questions to ask to ensure that the risk falls under tolerable, intolerable, or broadly acceptable. Right? Is it technically possible to reduce the risk further? That's the one of the questions here. Or who gains the benefit and who wears the cost? Is it is the risk ethically acceptable, or do we have information to make decision, and so on and so forth. There are some questions that we can ask to make decision whether they are intolerable, tolerable, or broadly acceptable. Okay, so how, again, the question is, how do we know that risk is low, risk is high? Well, organizations have standards to determine if risks are acceptable or not. Okay, they can refer to the costs incurred of the risks, for instance, and different organizations may have different standard in terms of their costs, right? Some organizations say, if the risk will cost me $1,000, then it is quite high for me. Right? The other organizations say, yep, it is manageable, I can pay for it, that's it, let's move on. Okay? So it depends on the organization standard. Okay? Now, we can also look at risk from 5x5 matrix, like this one here. We're using 5x5 matrix. One is normally to determine rare in terms of likelihood or probability. 5 is certain, okay? And the same thing for consequence, another 5 rating scale from insignificance to catastrophic. So there you go. We have a 5x5 matrix. Okay. Here, normally, if the risk level falls somewhere between 1 to 6, we normally allow the normal procedure to address that risk. Okay, to address those risks. Okay. How do we get them? We multiply consequence and probability. Okay. Now, if risk falls somewhere between 8 to 12, normally the project manager would get involved in solving the risks. And if the risk level falls 15 and above, then we normally get the senior management team to get involved. Okay? This is not a way to look at risk matrix. We can look at it from the similar way as the one that you just saw before. This one is taken the complete version of the one from the Project Management Institutes, the organization who published the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge. Okay, so now there are two types here: threats or negative risks, and the other one is opportunities. Which is basically the positive impact. Okay, so this represents the impact, either negative or positive, and this one here represents likelihood. Right, so we can measure it 0.1, 0.3 until 0.9, the highest likelihood, highest level of likelihood. Okay? And we can also put the impact from 0.05, 0.1. 0.2, 0.4, 0.8, right? And here we can multiply the risk. Let's say if one risk event is considered as 0.3 in terms of likelihood analysis, and in terms of impact 0.10, therefore we multiply those numbers, 0.3 multiplied by 0.1, we should get 0.03. Okay, so that tells us the risk matrix. This tells us the overall. This tells us the level of risk. Now, if you look at that, similar to the previous slide, it also tells us the degree of risk level. Okay, from 0.01 right through 0.05, we normally let the the risk level is considered as quite low, and normally we just let the normal procedure in the organization to fix it, to address it. Okay, from 0.06 to 0.14, we normally consider that moderate level. So we normally get the project manager to get involved. Okay, and 0.18 or 0.18 plus, we normally say, well, it is quite serious, so we need to elevate it to the next level. Okay? So that's how we use the risk matrix risk level here, using risk matrix. Okay? Another approach about the risk assessment matrix. We can use again likelihood and this one here, negligible through severe, basically the impact or consequence. We can merge these two. Let's say we have from likelihood perspective, we have rating from rare until almost certain. Okay. Now, from negligible perspective, we have from impact perspective, we have negligible right through severe. So if we merge these two, we can get the results in terms of level of risk. Okay. So if an event is considered to be likely in terms of likelihood, and in terms of impact is considered as major, that means it's quite high. The risk level is quite high. Right. Right. So we discussed this slide in the previous module. I just add with one more thing in here, the risk level. Okay. Let's say we have two risks. Okay, A and B. Likelihood for risk event A is 2, and the impact is 5. Therefore, the risk level would be the product of likelihood and impact, right? 2 by 5. That means 10. Okay, and let's have a look at the second risk, risk B. Likelihood is 3, impact is 4. Therefore, the risk level would be 12. Okay, 3 by 4. Okay. Now, since this one is higher than that, and we assuming that we only have 2 risk events, that means priority number 1 would be B. Okay, so you can imagine that, let's say we are launching a new product, and the first risk would be competitors reducing their price, let's say. Okay, and the second risk would be our staff leaving the organization, or key staff leaving the organization, for instance, and we measure the likelihood and impact, and that's the results. Okay, so that's basically risk register, part of the risk register that we need to complete. Right, guys, they're basically the key points that of module 4. Now, what's the next thing? Well, again, my favorite slide, basically. So please do not bang our heads. Okay, so what we expect you to do, what we recommend you to do is to go to module 4 and attempt all tasks. If you need help, you can email me. Okay, guys, stay tuned for the next module. And there are my references. Good luck.